Three, two, one. Welcome back to DMAH and the Mic Drop. I'm Mike Rao, and
I'm DMAH.
Thank you so much for joining us for episode 5. This is our 5th attempt at being less boring and more entertaining to you guys. So for everyone who's tuned in before, thank you so much. And yeah, without wasting any time, I want to jump into the thick of it. Daniel Ma, Marshall Club doing huge things.
Yes. The air is buzzing right now, and I'm really excited for next Monday. That's July 20th, which happens to be the day that Bruce Lee died. Rest in peace. But we are dropping something very special in his honor, and that is Marshall Club's version of Fist of Fury. And Fist of Fury is a very special piece because this is one that's kind of been done by all of the successive martial arts legends in martial arts movies. And this is our take. And I think I'd like to say before it drops that we did raise the bar. At least that's what we were hoping for. But ultimately, I can't say that. You guys have to be the judge. Either way, I think there's going to be a lot of exciting action. And I really hope you guys appreciate our take.
Dude, I'm so excited. This is one of the first big projects that you guys have done between Ip Man and then the one at your school. Where it's Stephen Chow. Yeah, Supreme Art of War.
The one that you were in?
Yes. I had a chance to see a little bit of both of those, either by being a PA on one or having a quick cameo in the other. This is the first one I have had zero exposure to, so I'm super excited to see it with fresh eyes.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what you think, because this one has a lot of precedence, right? Like, there's a formula to it, there's things that people expect. And I'm hoping that to some degree we flip the script just a little, but for the most part, it's like the one thing you can count on is high adrenaline action, you know? I'm hoping that a lot of you will see a lot of things for the first time. And also, as far as visual style goes, I think this one is going to be an envelope well pushed for Marshall Club.
Dude, I am ultra excited. I think that every single time one of these drops, more and more people are exposed to what martial arts can be, and that's the thing that for me is the most exciting, that we're slowly converting, slowly evangelizing to the people that they don't need to settle for inadequate martial arts. They don't need to settle for what Hollywood is churning out, but there is a better gospel out there when it comes to martial arts.
Yes, I'm to be frank, I love action movies, but I haven't been able to watch action movies for a long time. Because you're right, and I say this at the risk of, maybe falling in bad graces with people we know, but action sucks nowadays. People just, especially in America's culprit number one, but people have forgot how to shoot action. Or they've settled for things, and they've tricked themselves into thinking certain conventions are good, but really, it's just mediocre. You see shaky cam, it has that frenetic pace to it, but really all it does is discombobulates the audience. It gets them it gets them to tune out. And I think the art of movie making, regardless of the genre, is to immerse the audience, to get them to forget that they're sitting in a seat in a movie theater or to forget that they're sitting in their living room. You really want to suck them into this world that's outside of the one that they live in, and let them know that they're happening and that they're seeing this firsthand. And shaking the camera a lot gets people's agitation up, but it doesn't actually take them to a better place. It just makes them tune out. So it's you want continuity, you want legibility, you want to be immersed in the story so that you care about the action that's taking place. Because action can be good, but if it's not connected to the narrative, then people don't care about it. And that's what Marshall Club's striving to do differently.
One of the things that shaky cams do, it's a cheap parlor trick. What it ends up being is just a way to hide the lack of skill that the participants in the shaky cam, like the people on footage, have. So when you don't have somebody who's super good at punching, if you make it hard to see that their punch is ugly, then it makes the punch less ugly. When you make it harder to track the action, you can hide the fact that they're not actually selling the punches well, they're not selling the hits well, they're not selling the falls well. It just covers up all those ugly edges. And while it's cool that they have a way to cheat the system. At the same time, it's also kind of a shame because there's a way to do it without cheating that really highlights the genre of action, which is the action,
Yeah, I don't want to sound cliche when I say this, but I really do miss the action movies of the 80s, and I mean American movies. And it's not just because old school is always the best school, but back then there were action stars who crafted themselves for the genre. And I'm talking about your Arnold Schwarzeneggers, your Sylvester Stallones, your Jean-Claude Van Dammes. And sure, say what you will about their traditional acting skills, but the truth was they fashioned themselves for the movies that they were doing. And that's one way that Martial Club connects to them. Because we train outside as martial artists, and there's always this thing in our head that's saying that our training is going to feed back into the films we make. And I do very much believe that this was a part of the mentality of the people who made the genre great in the first place. Sylvester Stallone trained his way into fighting shape to be Rocky. And Schwarzenegger trained to be the Terminator, And I just love that there's this immersion, there's this integration between their outside life, their life outside of movies, and their life in movies. The seam was not so defined because that's just how much they gave themselves to their work. And that's what I think is missing in today's action genre. And that's what I hope Martial Club will bring back. And that's what I hope will become the norm in the years to come.
Dude, no lie, people hate on them as actors, but I think that looking at their stuff from back then and comparing it to what the comparable what we have today, they're so much better in terms of just acting. Take out the action, take out all the other stuff. They're way more compelling and way more amusing and way more funny than the Vin Diesels of today. I don't want to bash that much on Vin Diesel. I'm sure he's an okay dude, but he's terrible on the screen. He's utterly terrible. I mean, maybe it's a directorial issue or a dialogue issue, but when he tries to be serious, it makes me giggle and giggle with disgust because it's just utterly uncompelling and very, very, very stiff. Whereas even the most absurd lines Arnold had to deliver back in the day had a little bit of charm to them that's totally absent in a lot of these new takes on action. So
yeah and one thing that plagues the action genre and the horror genre now that didn't necessarily do it back then was people took those genres seriously back then. The Exorcist could actually win awards, and Terminator 2 specifically could be regarded as a good movie, period, not just a good action movie. But nowadays you've got Fast and the Furious 17 and you've got you've just got these movies that are throwaway movies, and they're made with the thought firmly planted in mind that they're throwaway movies. People even watch it to know that they're watching mindless stuff, and that overall what's the opposite of elevates the genre? It demotes the genre, and it makes it so that there's this clearly established totem pole, and at the bottom you find action and horror and all the genres we love so much, and we watch them and we make those movies knowing that they can't win awards. But I like that in the recent decades, certain movies have helped to kind of poke through that hood we've placed over the martial arts genre, for example. As a sub-genre of the action genre, there have been a couple martial arts movies like a Fearless, like a Ip Man, like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon that dare to reach for the ceiling of fine art, So we're getting closer to those days when you can produce a martial arts movie that can be considered a fine movie in and of itself, regardless of the fact that it's a genre piece.
It's almost like superhero movies to a degree, For a long time, superheroes were pretty kitschy, but then you came out with The Dark Knight, and I think my favorite, is Thor Ragnarok. Waititi is a freaking genius. But yeah, I think that there is a need to re-elevate these genres into the spotlight. I feel like the actors who are in them, I don't know if it's a pride thing or a lack of pride in their work, But I remember there was a point in time where it was like
Yeah.
there was like real competition between the different starring actors, and they like really cared about being the number one guy, getting the number one box office, making the most money in the theaters. Like I remember this story about
Right. Right.
it was Arnold and Sylvester. Do you know this story?
No, tell me, enlighten me.
Okay, so they hated each other. I don't know if they like truly hated each other or they like, kind of like were frenemies where they really like wanted to beat each other always. They were always going out for the same roles, always auditioning for the same things.
Yeah.
And long story short, Arnold was presented with this terrible movie idea. And he was like, no, I'm not going to do this. But he basically incepted it into either the agent or somehow he got word to Schwarzenegger that he wanted to do the role. So Schwarzenegger took the role and made one of the worst movies of all time. And he like, to this day, they're like much friendlier. And he always gives him crap about, like this terrible movie that Schwarzenegger or that Stallone did because Schwarzenegger like tricked him into doing it. So ultra big flop.
I love that. I love that these are people who interact with each other in the real world and in the movie world. It's like their personalities are so big, and it's like obviously they're going to beef and obviously they're going to collide, but the collisions, the frequencies that the collisions make kind of produce a harmony, And I like how you put it, frenemies, because I love Arnold Schwarzenegger and I love Sylvester Stallone, and it's just great that we live in a world that just barely has enough room for both of them. And yeah, it was just great to see them like duke it out, because ultimately that's what made them better actors at the end of the day, better action stars.
Seriously.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that so much. I was watching another movie the other day, Ben-Hur, and then that movie was like blockbusters. That was blockbuster status in the 50s, and things were so different back then. Back then, you could have a 3.5-hour movie and a biblical themed movie and a movie be both action and drama at the same time and have that be one of the biggest movies of all time. And it's just so different than how it's done now. It's a far cry from now. Or I should say that today's movies are far cry from that, where a movie could be talking about the Christ. It's literally subtitled A Tale of the Christ, and have that be the thing that everybody wants to spend their money on during the weekend at the theaters.
Yeah, we just live in a super different generation.
Yeah.
It makes me sad as a Christian that a lot of people associate Christianity and my faith, my God, with counter-progressive ideals.
Yeah.
And I think if you actually look at it, Jesus was one of the most radical people who taught among the most radical things ever said. In a generation where racism was a thing, he taught his people, like, dude, it doesn't matter whether you're Jew or Gentile. Like, the gospel, like, my message of good news is for everyone, regardless of color or, like, where race, gender, wherever you are. Like, I am your God. Not just a God for these people, but a God for every people. Mm-hmm. And that was, like, ultra radical in the day of Jesus. And nowadays, people look at, like, Christianity and they see, like, people who are really bigoted and people who are really closed-minded. And I think that what they see isn't the true reflection of what the religion states or what Jesus stated, but rather a poor expression by people who have failed to honor what Jesus said while still claiming to be his followers. And it disappoints me because, I don't blame people for thinking Christians are closed-minded. I do hope that, those people who have those opinions are willing to like look at people like you and I and make judgments of their own and like see with their eyes rather than with their experiences that, potentially not all Christians are the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just so amazing how many iterations of, how many chapters the church has gone through. Because, it's been... it's been 2,000 years and change now, 2 millennia and change. And there's been so many different histories, so many different things happening. And Christianity has meant different things at different times. Because like you said, there was a time when it was the most progressive thing you can possibly think of. and it was the most earth-shattering, worldview-shattering thought you could have. And that's exactly what it did. It transformed the landscape of the world. And now it's like it's like now Christianity is becoming the fringe, the counterculture, if you will. It's becoming like everything that was considered counterculture 10 years ago, 15 years ago is now becoming mainstream, and the flip has script. Let me do that again. The script has flipped, yeah. And it's just so crazy that that's just the way the world works. It's like sometimes you're on the bottom and sometimes you're on the top. Like, it was kind of weird, but Tracy and I have talked a lot about the end times and Revelation this week, and it just led into all kinds of crazy discussions. But one such topic that came up was the Antichrist. People hear about the Antichrist, and even people who aren't Christians, even people who don't know anything about the Bible, have thoughts about the Antichrist. Some people think he's a person who has yet to come. Some people think he's someone who's already making his move, and some people think he's just an idea.
Donald Trump. Excuse me.
An idea.
That's not actually what I think, but
I know. Yeah, because that's way too obvious, right? Maybe I should hesitate to say this, but it's already in the past. There was a time when I thought Barack Obama was the Antichrist, because for people who think the Antichrist is a person, he's going to be someone with a lot of charisma,
super charming.
Super charming. People love
Everyone
him.
loves him.
Yeah, he's accepted with open arms. It's not like he's going to come out there with a red face and a goatee and horns sticking out of his head. Like, people think that the devil is on the nose like that. But I think the Antichrist is someone that will gladly lead us. And I remember seeing Barack Obama on TV for the very first time. It was on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And this was before he voiced any intention to run for president of the United States. And I looked at him and I saw the effect that his words were having on the people who heard him. Because it was having that sway on me. And I'm like, dude, this guy is smooth. And I looked at him right away and I'm like, could this be the one? And I'm like, I got all like antsy and scared. And then sure enough, shortly after that, people are like, this is the next president of the United States. And he was just coming in and taking over. And I think his run in office kind of showed that he was mortal. But at the same time, ideas that he planted still exist today. In fact, they exist stronger today than they did back then. It was seeds that he planted that have grown into trees now. His ideas, he breathed them out into the atmosphere, and now they have the momentum of cannonballs. They're just breaking down structures. And the world we live in today, socially speaking, and on a lot of other levels, is completely different than the world that we lived in before he took office.
It's true. It's true.
So maybe he is the Antichrist. No, we're totally going to get flagged for this.
At the end of the day, I don't care what you think about politics. I don't think that a lot of these guys in office are worth the hero worship that we assign to them. I know a lot of people look back at Ronald Reagan from the conservative side, and they're like, he was like the best guy ever. But they don't consider the fact that he passed laws that basically led to the partisan news that we have today, where the news stations don't tell the truth. They just tell an opinion of what the truth is. Like they say, oh, well, this happened and this is my opinion on it. And they just communicate to the masses that, Donald Trump is bad or Donald Trump is good. They don't actually say what Donald Trump says. They'll hint at it. And that's really, really bad for us. We need to be a people. We have mental processes capable of looking at information objectively and analyzing it on our own. Yeah. But Ronald Reagan basically passed laws to to make it legal for news outlets to digest information for us. Yeah. So that they're like mother birds feeding us regurgitated material. Yeah. That was terrible. That's one of the worst things that I think have happened in our lifetimes. I mean, in my lifetime. You're a little younger than I am. You had a little bit of Ronald Reagan. Yeah. Yes, you did have a little Ronald Reagan. You caught your 89?
Yeah, 89. Just the very tail end, right?
Wait, no. Sorry. I'm all off. It's 88. Yeah, 88 through 92 was Bush. 92. Then it was
Reagan,
Clinton.
Bush.
Yeah. Yes, Bush,
Yeah,
Bush,
yeah,
Bush.
yeah.
Yeah, so you miss Reagan. But like, in the same way, like Obama, like people like love him and adore him basically more than any other Democratic president in the past 20, 30 years. But like he passed a bunch of laws that aren't all that good,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
let's just look at it strictly from an objective perspective. He did things that weren't designed for the benefit of the American people. They were designed for the benefit of his pocketbooks. And I know you're going to be like, whoa, like, well, how come we don't know about this? And it's like, well, because media controls the airwaves. Here's me being Eddie Bravo and conspiracy theorist. But like, he passed into law the net neutrality laws, right?
Yeah.
Immediately after he left office, a company that greatly benefited from the net neutrality laws, Netflix, gave him a contract to be a producer for Netflix that could be worth $65 million. And the question I have is like, what did he do to have the experiences and skill set necessary to be a producer for a TV show? And you might say like, well, you don't really need much skill to be a producer anyway. But like the question I have is like, doesn't it seem fishy that he passed a law that was super beneficial to this company and then the company gave him money afterwards? That sounds to me like corporate cronyism. And I think if you look back at how the Clintons became worth $100 million after they left office, you'll see that there's a bunch of back scratching that occurred. They get paid all this money to go speak at corporate retreats. Nobody cares about what they say. No, they're just getting compensation for laws that were passed when they were in office that were beneficial to these companies. And I don't think that anyone in politics is particularly guilt-free of this, regardless of party or policy.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why I really, really liked Andrew Yang, who was running for president. He said, like, no, we have to make this stuff illegal. Like give the president a raise. He deserves a raise, but make it illegal for him to get paid or have speaking engagements that give him big compensations or stand on the board of any of these big companies. But anyway, we're all over the place. We're getting political here.
Well, I just find it interesting that a president, obviously there's always going to be two sides of the coin as far as opinions about a president goes. Anybody worth talking about, you're going to have your detractors and you're going to have your supporters. But it seems like in hindsight, one president who seems to be universally well regarded is George Washington. And I know for a fact that during his time, there were people who didn't believe in him. But like now we look back.
Charles Lee.
Yeah, Charles Lee. And like during the wartime, at least in the beginning of the war, people were like, "You are leading America's youth to slaughter," and he stuck to his guns, and he is rightly considered a father of our nation. And I don't know. There's this mystique about him. Nowadays, we have more depictions of him in film and in shows. But like I always looked at that face on the $1 bill or on a quarter, and I'm like, who was this man? He looks so strong, he looks so powerful, and this is just an inanimate depiction of him. But I think like there's some weight to the legacy that he left, and there's a reason why his face is carved into this mountain, in the middle of the United States. And it's interesting. Like I remember researching him in high school. But like recently my interest has kind of resurged in him. And a lot of that has to do with a play that is now showing on Disney Plus called Hamilton. But yeah.
You put a crack in the dam.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah. It's, yeah. I finally got a chance
Alexander
to watch
Hamilton.
Yeah. Alexander Hamilton.
You watched it.
I finally watched it.
Okay, so
yeah, finally watched it.
What did you think?
I loved it. I feel like this is this seed that you planted in my mind a long time ago. You've been watering it over and over again over a long period of time. And I heard some of the songs, they started to grow, but watching it together in one go and seeing the context and like really, really drinking in the colorful characters and the different motivations and just seeing it all come together as one glorious piece, totally worth it. And I absolutely enjoyed it. And I can't wait to the day when I see it live. That was a fine piece of art, I must say.
So my history with Hamilton when I was in 10th grade learning about the US Revolution, I heard about this dude named Alexander Hamilton. He was in my textbooks, and I remember thinking to myself, this guy's story is epic.
Yeah.
He's legendary. Of all the founding fathers, he was the guy who stuck out to me, and I was like, dude, this guy is freaking awesome. Back in 2015, when I heard that there was a play about his life, I was like, whoa, that's super fascinating. I want to go see it.
Yeah.
I was in New York City at the time. I lined up to do the Broadway lottery,
Yeah.
where they give out, you have a chance to win the right to buy a ticket for $10. And these tickets were like probably 200, 300, 400, thousands of dollars. Actually, no, they were front row seats. So at this point, it was just about to get popular. And they were already worth like $500, $600, $700. And I would show up. The first few times I showed up, the lines were like 40, 50 people long lining up for this lottery. Over the course of the month and a half that I lined up, and I lined up almost every day, it grew from like 40 people to like the entire street, completely covered, both sides of the street. Cars are being blocked and honking in New York City, like literally probably 300, 400, 500 people every single lottery. And that's just like my best guess. It might have been significantly more than that, but I never got to see it, unfortunately. And I refused to listen to the music because I was like, dude, like this is my favorite founding father. I want to see it live for the first time and have the full experience. But years later, I finally cracked. I listened to it. I fell in love with it. And I just got to see it for the first time this past Sunday on Disney Plus as well.
When I watched
it.
Oh
man.
Yeah, we watched it at the same time. Yeah, I related to it on a very visceral level. I mean, you already told me that I would get a lot out of this, but I had no idea how deeply the themes of the play or the musical would resonate within me.
It's like the foundation of Marshall Club.
Yeah, exactly. Like, honestly, I find myself in a place that I'm very sure that Alexander Hamilton found himself at one time. Because I already kind of resonated with a lot of the themes when you were introducing me to the songs, you know, last year or 2 years ago. But now it's like unprecedented levels of how much I relate to him. Because it's like, this is someone who knows somewhere deep in his heart and his soul that he's going to change the world somehow. He just needs to find out how it's going to happen. And like, he's just waiting for that shot, right? He's not going to throw away his shot. And like, there's so many times when the world acted against him. His circumstances did not want to see him succeed. And everything from sickness to the death of his family to poverty to natural disasters, it felt like God was acting like against him almost. But it's like he knew that he had to use whatever he had at his disposal to get ahead. And he wrote like he was running out of time. And that just like really, really resonated within me, because I think we're all given our talents, right? You know, like to some, much is given, to some little, but whatever it is, it's like we got to use that, and we just got to dig, and we got to dig, and we got to make something out of it. He was good with a pen, and he wrote like he was running out of time, and eventually the things he wrote turned into the pillars of our country, and that is satisfying on the deepest level, and that is so inspiring. And I'm really, really happy that I got to see it presented to me in such a creative and palatable way.
And the thing is, like, he came from nothing.
Yeah.
This wasn't a super successful person, or like he didn't come from a super successful family. No, he was literally the bastard son who was orphaned. And he rose his way up. You know, he fought his way tooth and nail to become like the $10 founding father. You know, like it's a freaking exciting story. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. For those of you who have watched it, oh my gosh, like I was blown away. This is for the Hamilton fans. This is for the people who may have been in my shoes. I'd listened to the soundtrack probably over 100 times. Watching it, holy cow, Eliza blew me away. Her acting, like I never really thought that much of her songs when I listened to the soundtrack, but her acting was so powerful. Leslie Odom, Aaron Burr as well was ultra powerful. Like I felt like while there was a lot of good acting, I do think that those two shone like gems. They just shined in a way that like almost dwarfed the great ability of some of the other cast members. I was thoroughly impressed. Hey, do you know Angelica,
Yeah.
the older sister? Do you know how old the actress who plays Angelica is?
How old is she?
Guess.
Okay. Since you're asking me, I'm guessing she's older than she looks. She doesn't look that old. But Black Don't Crack, so I'm gonna say 48.
Oh, okay. She's 49, so you're pretty close. She was 45 when she played it, but like I literally like triple taked when I saw her age because she looks like she's
In her 20s?
like she could pass for being in her 20s.
Yeah.
Black Don't Crack, Yellow Stay Mellow.
Yeah, absolutely. And the girl who plays
Asian Don't Raisin.
the girl who plays Eliza Schuyler is half Chinese, right? I think.
Yes.
And I found it very interesting that they could have several people in the principal cast play two people in the principal cast, like two major characters, and it still worked. You know, there wasn't that much cognitive dissonance.
Literally, the three of the principal cast have double roles.
Yeah.
Four,
Crazy.
because it's John Lawrence, Thomas Jefferson, or John Lawrence Lafayette, and Hercules Mulligan, and then Peggy Schuyler.
Right.
Yeah, I actually didn't know when I first started listening to it about a lot of the double roles. I think you could tell that Alexander and Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson were the same person, but I never knew Hercules Mulligan was the same as John Adams. No,
no,
not John
he
Adams.
was, okay, let me see. So
you guys
So
know.
Burr was not Burr. Lawrence and Philip Hamilton were the same person, right?
Philip Hamilton.
Yeah,
Correct.
Yeah. And then, who was the other guy? Was he Adams? He was Adams. He was a bigger guy, right? Mulligan.
Yes, but no, I don't think he was Adams because Adams didn't have a role. Like he wasn't depicted. Like.
Oh, right.
Like they always quote him and what he says about Alexander Hamilton
Madison.
quietly, Madison.
Right,
James Madison.
Yeah.
James Madison.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's dude. It also reminds me, man. Like we used to live in a generation where we were voting for Federalists and Whigs and Democratic Republicans. That's one thing.
Yeah.
You know, there's a part of me that hopes that we as a people will remember we're not voiceless. We're not shackled to this two-party system.
Right.
This two-party system arose because people were dissatisfied with what they had.
Right.
They were dissatisfied with the Federalist Party, which is what the party was that people were a part of. And if we're dissatisfied again, if we're unhappy with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, which a lot of us are, and if we voice our disappointment and our dissatisfaction in the poll booths, it's possible that one day we'll look back at the Democrats and the Republicans like the Whigs and the Federalists. So I'm not saying that you need to be dissatisfied. I'm just saying if you are, don't settle for just voting for the one that you're less dissatisfied with. You know, vote on principle.
Right.
Be somebody who's willing to create change in the poll booth, because otherwise we'll be stuck here, and that's the real danger of being afraid of throwing away your vote. You know, like the true throwing away your vote is not voting on principle.
Right.
The true throwing away your shot is settling for one of the options that are presented to you instead of demanding for an option that truly suits what you believe in.
Right. I think we're conditioned to underestimate ourselves because it's so easy to think that a vote is just a drop in a bucket. But I think the very fact that we occupy the space we occupy and the fact that we breathe the air we breathe, that changes the universe on a very profound level. And like the butterfly effect, like a butterfly flapping its wings on the other side of the world and you got a hurricane on the other side of the world. Like, even if it's not that dramatic, the things we do and the things we say, the things we believe, we have the ability to make those more than just thoughts and more than just words. Like, I think people need to understand the effect they have on the world a little bit more, and not just sit by and accept things the way they are. I think that's one of the... I honestly believe, with that in mind, that's one of the core tenets of Martial Club's mission, you know? Like, because we live in a big world, and we live with things where there are huge forces at play, large machines, large industries, corporations, all of that. But I think one thing we've always believed is that the power of one individual should never be overlooked, because like all you have to do is will for it and work for it, and you know, something will happen. And it just takes determination and unwavering faith, which are not easy tasks, but if you keep pressing it long enough, like something will happen. And I think like that's something that people have a hard time believing, but more people must believe that, and the world will change if more people believe that.
You should tell the story of Martial Club's foundation. Have you ever actually, like, you know, told the story in its proper form? Like, you know,
I have.
Because, dude, it's a straight up Peachtree Garden, Three Kingdoms / Founding Fathers, like, not gonna waste your shot kind of story.
Yeah. I've visited the story in many ways, to many degrees. Oh man, that siren's really, really loud. 1 second.
It's okay. We can pause.
I'll let that.
Dude, you guys should make a video, like, you should make a dramatized movie version of, or dramatized short of that. That'd be epic.
Yeah, I was...
Especially with the bad guys in the real life.
Yeah, seriously. I think about who I'd cast as, never mind. Like, I've told the story... I've told the story before. Like, there was a time when Martial Club tried to do its own podcast, but it just didn't take. And there were times when I got to speak on other people's podcasts about how Martial Club came together. This is, you know, maybe some people will dismiss this as a vain conceit on my end, but I do hope that maybe one day our story would be depicted on film. Maybe not a film that we make. Maybe other people would make it. But I really do think, and this is not to be all like, you know, to wax poetic or anything like that, but I really do think that the meeting of Andy Lee and Brian Lee and Daniel Ma was a cosmic occurrence. You know, that's really, really...
It was legendary, dude. It was legendary.
But I really do think that there's something about the way that we interact with each other that's more than just three random people meeting. But I met Andy back in college, and it was actually a very chance encounter that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't go to the church that we went to at the time. So,
whoa.
Yeah, did you know that? Like, I was...
No, I had no idea church had anything to do with it.
Yeah, I met Andy Lee through Matt Hodges. Yeah, so Matt Hodges was a friend of ours at church. He was a film major at CSULB. And we were friends because we went to the same church and we both practiced martial arts, and we both had that, I guess, that audacity to believe that we could, you know, do good martial arts on film and make a good film that was not just your mindless action film, that could also have a deeper spiritual meaning. So he, being a film major, started to put this film together, and he wanted me to play the antagonist. It was supposed to be some spiritual allegory, you know, sold as a martial arts film. And he got two people to be the stunt advisors on it, a young Andy Lee and a young Yoshi Sudarso. Who's basically like making his way into movies now. Yeah. So he called me over to CSULB to choreograph, and he's like, "Oh, there's these two guys I want you to meet." So I went there, and I saw this tall, chiseled guy, and I saw like this shorter, frumpier, more nervous looking guy next to him. I found out the tall, good-looking guy was Yoshi, and the other guy was Andy Lee. And I remember like casting judgment right away. I'm like, dude, you've got this alpha and you've got this, not even beta. I dismissed him as a gamma.
Omega.
But yeah, like, so we started choreographing, and like we didn't know what to make of each other. And like Yoshi was like right off the bat, like really acrobatic, and Andy was like really withdrawn. And when he did his choreography, I'm like, oh, this guy like reads too many kung fu books. And it was so funny because I dismissed him right away. But I remember that was the start of our collaboration. You know, we work.
Does he know this?
Yeah, I've told him. I told him I thought he was a complete beta when I met him.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so that project with Matt Hodges ended up falling through. I don't even know where the footage is now. I don't think he ended up getting to finish it. But it turns out that Gym Max, the gym that I trained acrobatics at, was also the same training spot for a young Andy Lee and a young Yoshi Sudarso. So I ended up seeing them there more often. And back then, Andy had he still has long hair, but it was black and it covered his eyes. He was very withdrawn. But I went there and I saw him and I saw the way he moved. And I remember being in shock. Like, I remember trying to dismiss it, trying to find...
Your heart fluttered?
No. Like, at first, my initial reaction was like, oh, no. His kicks are way too exaggerated. And, like, I remember it being so clean and so picturesque that I wanted to dismiss it as wrong. Like, that's how much attention to detail he paid when he did his stuff. And the funny thing is, he and Brian actually had the same haircut back then. And back then, he and Brian weighed about the same amount, and Brian was only like 2 inches taller. So I thought they were the same person. So I would see them often, and there was this one time at Gym Max where I waved to who I thought was Andy, and it was Brian. And he looked at me all weird because I had never interacted with Brian ever in my life. And like at that moment, I'm like, oh, this guy doesn't like me. So, like, I tell him to this day all the time, I'm like, you didn't used to like me, you know? Like, you gave me the dirtiest look when I tried to wave to you that one time. And he denies this with all of his heart, but totally, he gave me the dirtiest look. But I found out that there were two of them. So, Andy Lee and Brian Lee. A lot of people, like, back then you could actually believe they were brothers because they looked exactly alike. And, but, you know, the way gyms are laid out, it's like a playground. So on a playground, you have your king of the playground. So Andy and Brian were like the kings of the playground, and they took up most of the floor. And for those of you who have never been to Opa Gym, it's really intimidating because you have these people doing really high-level martial arts, really high-level acrobatics. And if you yourself are new to it, it's really hard to play with the big boys. So I would always go off into my corner, and I would practice basic tricks, and I would practice martial arts. So one day, the tricks weren't working for me. I was just practicing Kung Fu. And Andy walks over to me. And at this point, I realized I severely underestimated him the first time we met. He's really, really top-notch talented. And he sees me practicing this traditional praying mantis form. And he's like, oh, that's Talong Tran, that's praying mantis. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, hey, can you teach me that? So I'm like, oh okay. So I started teaching him a form. It's for those of you who know Chinese martial arts, it's Cha Trui, the long fist praying mantis form. And he started learning it, and his form was just really, really good. And I was teaching it to him, and he was just drinking it up like a sponge. And that was kind of like the first time where we interacted, and we realized we had a strong common interest that wasn't shared by a lot of people. And we started talking more and started trading ideas more about Martial Club. And eventually, he started inviting me over. I remember the first time we ever met, other than that time at CSULB, other than those times at Gym Max, he was talking to me, and I told him that I was in a class at UCI called Hong Kong Action Cinema. It was this class where they taught you about Hong Kong movies, and it counted towards my major. It was, like, needless to say, it was my favorite class ever in college. And he heard that I was in this class, and he's like, hey, do you mind if I crash one of your lectures sometime? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So this was 2010 or 2011. I was either a junior or senior in college. And it happened to be his birthday. So he came over to UCI. And I remember I bought him boba because Facebook told me it was his birthday. And he's like, oh, thanks, man. So he sat with me in class. And it was so funny because there was a pop quiz that day. So, like, he sits down, and, like, the teacher's like, all right, class, bust out your pencils. We're going to take a quiz. And he's like, oh, crap. And I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. Just, like you can take a paper. You don't have to turn it in. And he's, like, sitting there super nervous. Because, like, Andy gets nervous whenever he's in a situation like that. And I'm like, dude, just don't worry about it. You don't have to write anything. When she collects the papers, just, like, turn in a blank form. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's, like, sitting there, and his hands are folded, and he's shaking. And I take the quiz. And then, like, I remember, like, looking over him because he's so nervous. And then she's like, all right, pencils down in 5, And then I see him pick up a pencil and scribble in answers for every single answer right before she calls it, and he slaps down his pencil. And I'm like, dude, you didn't need to do that. So like, he took a pop quiz about Hong Kong action cinema without having like been there at all, and then he actually turned it in because he was so nervous. But like, that was like the beginning of our friendship. I'm like, dude, you really care about this. So like, he would always ask me about what I learned in that class. We started hanging out outside. I got to know him, and I got to know Brian, and we started hanging out. And one day he asks me, do you want to film shapes? And I'm like, what's shapes? So shapes, for those of you who don't know, in old school Hong Kong movies where you have your tiger and your crane and your praying mantis, like those are called shapes. So old school traditional kung fu in movies are called shapes. And he's like, yeah, man, I've always wanted to film shapes, and I haven't been able to find someone who's willing to do that. Everyone wants to do that contemporary action, like the kickboxing and the grappling and that gritty, more realistic stuff. He's like, I want to do shapes. I want to do old school kung fu. And you're one of the few people who even practices kung fu anymore, so would you be willing to film with me? So I remember going over to their house and filming in Westminster. We went to... I think the first thing we ever filmed was actually outside of DMAH. I don't even know if that footage still exists, but it was a test fight, and we were doing kung fu choreography. And this was my first taste of legit choreography, like someone who actually knew their angles and someone who actually knew how to compose choreography. Because at that time I was part of a demo team, but nobody really knew what they were doing, at least not to that level. And we started pumping out video after video, like slowly at first, and we would post them on YouTube, and it would get a little bit of traction. But the thing is, we were always doing it for ourselves. Film was always an extension of who we were as martial artists. So we would train hard, we would develop our skill, and then we would put it to the test on camera with each other. And like, we didn't do it to gain attention, but as we got better, the more attention it garnered and the more traction we got. And it got to the point where we had like a pretty solid base of maybe like 5 little shorts under our name. And at that point, we had a rapport. Andy, Brian, and DMAH, like we hung out, we acted together, we just went around and did our thing. And like, we had that camaraderie.
8K barbecue.
Yeah. So I remember one time we were sitting down, we were talking to each other, and Andy's like, DMAH, what's your favorite fight scene? And I sat down and I thought about it, and I'm like, it was one of those moments, right? It was like a significant moment. Like, you know how like you feel that slight rumble and you feel gravity turn up, the air gets heavy, and you realize something special's happening. You don't fully realize it, but somehow your subconscious picks it up. And it was like we looked at each other and we're like, Martial Club. Because those of you guys who don't know, Martial Club is an old school kung fu movie from 1981, directed by RAO'S. He's our old school influence before we went all Jackie Chan. And it has this amazing fight scene at the end where a fighter from the north challenges a young Wong Fei Hong, who's a fighter from the south. And it's not about good or evil at this point. It's about a comparison of ideas. So they've realized that they're not here to kill each other or defeat each other. They're here to compare their expertise in Kung Fu, and hopefully that will lead them to an understanding. So north and south style, northern style Kung Fu is really different from southern style Kung Fu. And here they're in this alleyway to really, really show each other the most highly elevated aspects of their martial arts. And as the alleyway gets more and more narrow, they have to resort to their more and more advanced Kung Fu. And in the end, like, it's mostly a stalemate, but the northern stylist kind of like deals what would be the killing blow, and they realize that they're peers now and that they should put aside their differences. And even though the northern stylist is the older, more experienced martial artist who ultimately won the fight, he's like, I have someone here who is going to represent martial arts in the next generation. And that it was just a fight scene that was way ahead of its time. The way it told its story, the way it was composed, the speed of it, the cleanliness of it, like just the action was like, it was a game changer for the genre, and it was a game changer for Andy and a game changer for me. So to realize that we both thought that this one fight scene was the best, we're like, dude, this is how it should be done. And I noticed at that moment, I'm like, dude, we're kind of like a team, kind of like a club. And for us, it's clear now that martial arts is the thing that matters, like above all these other things. So maybe we should form something and call it. And we looked at each other and we're like, Martial Club, dude. We should call ourselves Martial Club, and we should start a YouTube channel. And all these films we've made, we should put it there, and we should just rep martial arts because nobody else will, not to the way we do it. And that's kind of like the day it was born. And Brian's like, yeah, okay. So like, yeah, so like the three of us, we just started doing it, and we were just practicing together really, really hard and refining our craft and like sharing our ideas. And eventually it just grew into this thing that it is now. And it's crazy because we're like almost 600K subscribers later. And in many ways, we're still just those three kids playing with a camera and practicing martial arts day in and day out. But it's just amazing to see where it's gone. And I dare to believe it's got much further to go.
Oh, hell yeah. Like, without question, it's got a lot further to go. Like, the impact you've had on your team's life, just seeing them. Like, there are people that are directly related to you that you have unequivocally inspired to, like, abandon the day-to-day grind to do something that they're passionate about. Like, I'm pretty sure Robo wouldn't mind. Like, shout out to Robo.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that he has that fire to be a stuntman, like that's because you guys, that's because of the opportunity you guys created.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, you have a huge part to do with the fact that I'm like aggressively, or not aggressively, but like pursuing auditions at all. I think, like, despite the fact that I liked being on camera and doing MasterChef, like, it wasn't until I went to acting class with you, and like 90% of the auditions that I've done are actually, yeah, every single audition I've done outside of food like entertainment has been because of you. And it's like, you guys are doing things that are like shaping lives around you. So I think that's like ultra evident that you guys have a lot more to go, or have a lot further to go, and have a lot more world shaping to do.
I just love how
Three Kingdoms, man.
Yeah. I just love how organically everything came into play. And all of this was just a bunch of chance encounters. The way we met, you and me, and the way Andy and I met, and the way Matt Hodges and I met. Like all these connections that might not have otherwise existed. The way Robo and I met, or Robo and you met. Like the fact that Robo and you met, well, you already knew each other, but that encounter you had outside of those auditions, led to him coming back to church. And it's just like, it's the consequences of a series of genuine interactions. We're being ourselves. And like, it's just amazing what that gives birth to. Like a chance encounter at a gym turns into Martial Club. And it just makes me think, like, how many of these opportunities do we miss out on when we're too concerned with things that don't ultimately matter? It's just...
I remember one of the first times I met Andy and Brian. Andy in particular, and you guys were already friends. It was at DMAH or PDA or one of those places. And gosh, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember asking him, like, oh, is it possible to like incorporate tricking, like Muay Thai, into tricking? And he looked at me with such disdain. And I was like, but like Tony Jaa does it. And now today, like probably like 8 years later, they're constantly doing these like elbows and flying knees. I was like, so Andy, you looked at me with such disdain. You were like,
yeah, Andy, you're gonna hear
so
this eventually.
Disgust.
He's calling you out, man. Like he fed you.
I'm just glad you're doing it. I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're doing it.
For sure.
I feel like a lot of these arts lend really well to each other. I'm just saying, you'd just be way ahead. Like, you would have hit 600,000 subscribers like 5 years ago if you just listened to me.
I know.
I'm just kidding.
More of the story is,
this is why.
Listen
this is
to
why.
Mike, he knows. No,
dude,
yeah.
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, and
now he's back overseas.
Yeah.
Doing big things. Where are they in terms of allowing to talk about the process?
I think
with that thing that I just mentioned.
For the most part, we still have to be a little under wraps. But yes, Andy is back in Australia, and
why? Like, because like all the other people that are associated to it, like it's public news. Why is he?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like he's not allowed to even say that he's attached, right?
I'm not sure. It might just be that he's erring towards caution, but
Sure.
I don't know actually. I haven't really read in detail what he's beholden to, but Brian might actually be joining him very soon. So, yeah, I mean not in the same capacity, unfortunately, but still, like it's a big deal. So we'll see. I don't know. Yeah, I know. Dude.
Do you know? Is it the thing that they like previously offered him, or
no? It's more.
Or the thing that we wanted him to be.
Unfortunately, not. No. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe that's for the sequel.
Do you know who they cast for that?
Oh, the one that was supposed to be offered to him?
No, the one that he auditioned for that he killed, but they offered to somebody else.
Yeah.
And they offered him something less.
You know, you've probably seen him on film. Yeah.
Wait. Oh,
well,
really?
we're not
Wow,
talking in
But
open
the
terms right now, so I'm just going to say who it is. Have you seen Creed 2?
Yes.
That guy. The bad guy.
The Russian?
Yeah. Drago Jr.
Oh,
Yeah. So lame, right? So lame. Like it's to the point where they have to bend over backwards just to make it work for that guy. It's like
all it is I think it's just they're picking the look because he does fit. He's huge. He's huge.
Yeah,
He looks scary. I do think visually, like, you know, the first second that you see him, you'll be like, wow, okay, that has a good effect. But like after that effect, like I've seen him move in Creed. I've seen him like act, and like I mean, not that he's bad, but just I know how good Brian is,
Right.
And I don't think the martial prowess, like all respect to, I don't think he moved poorly in Creed 2. I thought he was like pretty all right, you know, like they did a decent job training him. But like from a perspective of is he on Brian's level? Like heck no. And for the role that they were casting. So so they then offered him another role that he turned down.
Yeah.
Is it that role that he's going out there for?
No, I honestly think it's just like I think it's just like helping them train, and I'm not sure. I actually don't know. I don't know, but I don't.
No, it's better though.
Yeah.
It's better. It's better that they don't waste him on a throwaway role, so that when it comes to be his time to shine, they'll give him a role that he's fully deserving of, aka Fat Cobra. You heard it here first. Fat Cobra. Have you ever told Brian that? I'm like always scared because like the name Fat Cobra sounds like terrible, but the character is epic. You know, if it wasn't such a cool character, I would never suggest it.
Right.
Have you ever told him that?
I think I don't know. I'm not sure. I might not have, because I think you always do the description of the character justice. Like,
dude, he freaking eats, like he sucks a demon out of a body and eats it, like to defeat the bad guy or to like save the good guy from the thing possessing it. It's like, how much more Brian Lee can you get? That's like freaking epic.
I know, yeah. Well,
anyway,
we'll see.
Fat Cobra, Marvel Studios. You can give me associate producer credits or whatever casting. Just give me. You don't have to pay me. Just cast Brian Lee. Fat Cobra.
Yeah, do yourselves
you heard it here
all
first.
a favor.
He's perfect.
And just cast those two already. Your movie will be infinitely better. Infinitely better.
Yeah. Well,
but, you know.
They better not kill Andy. If they kill Andy, I'm going to boycott the... Well, actually, he wears a mask, so he could come back as somebody else.
Right, yeah. So ridiculous. Movies,
they could...
they have so much to learn.
Yeah, they have to, like, do one of those, like, Mission Impossible 2 mask reveals where Simu pulls off his mask and it's actually Andy.
I like how we're talking in such naked terms right now.
We're not getting it, but nobody's going to listen to this. We have like 100 people that are going to listen to this, so who cares? It is what it is.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to come clean. The movie that they're working on is Twilight 6. Yeah,
yes. I just realized the fact that I said that guy's name pretty much reveals that it was Twilight 6.
Twilight 6.
Yeah, Twilight 6.
They're going to kill us now. They're going to...
Yeah, I'm sorry, Twilight.
Yeah. Team Andy.
Yeah. Team Andy forever. Yeah. Oops. Has he not been attached to the has he not like clearly been attached to the project yet?
I'm pretty sure there's nothing
whatever.
like in black and white that says it, but I'm sure everybody figured it out. Like, our fans are not stupid, so.
You could just bleep me out, man. You could just like bleep out every time I say, that guy's name.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
It's, I'm sorry, guys. It's Twilight 6. We were meaning to surprise you.
Oh, that's right. Fat Cobra would also be a dead giveaway.
Yeah,
Jeez.
It's
I wasn't very coy.
It's in this novel that the vampires and the werewolves realize that they're actually the same species and that they're killing each other for no reason.
And they're in love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they find out
And then Brian comes along and eats all of them.
Yeah.
That's
the
Fat Cobra's
offspring
role.
that they shouldn't have been able to have can actually sparkle at night as well. And it's just it's just craziness, dude.
It's good. It's basically the best novel since, The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
This is going
so
to
good.
be the love story it was always meant to be.
Yes.
Dude, I freaking hate that movie.
I don't know how to follow up on
I
that.
freaking hate Twilight. Why
I've never
does it have
seen
to
it.
exist?
I've never seen
I
it.
refuse to watch that movie on principle. Like, I
But how can you hate it if you haven't watched
no,
it?
see, certain things are stranger things have existed. Like, oh my gosh, like such vile garbage. I don't need to watch it. Like, I don't know. People always make that argument. I tell people that I will not watch Twilight because I'm sure it will corrode a portion of my soul. And people are like, how can you hate it if you haven't tried it? I don't need to eat crap in order to know that it doesn't taste good, okay? Like, certain things you just know. Yeah. You don't have to be...
If it smells like crap, if it looks like
exactly.
crap,
I don't need to
tastes
eat
like
it.
crap.
I don't need to eat it to get that 1% of doubt out of the way. I'm quite sure. Like, I will be fine not taking it in this lifetime. I will be much better for it. I hate scrolling through Amazon Prime and seeing, like I'm scrolling through it, and I see, 7 Twilights in a row. There aren't even 7 Twilight movies. Like, it's like, oh, Twilight Breaking Dawn. Twilight Breaking Dawn extended cut, Twilight Breaking Dawn part 2, and it's like, no, I don't need this. I don't need this. In fact, you should your stock will rise if you just get that off of your interface. It's like, people, there are things in this world that shouldn't exist, and Twilight is one of those things that shouldn't exist.
So if you guys were wondering what to get Daniel for Christmas, Twilight Extended Edition.
Dude.
That's the trick. That's the one. That's what he wants.
Before Nick Jonas, people used to tell me that I look like Taylor Lautner, and I'm like, well, you, sir, are an ignorant ass. Like, that was like, back in the day when they had duels. That was grounds to challenge someone to a duel. It's like there are things in this world that shouldn't exist. Daniel. Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
Deep breath.
Did I tell you about, I never figured this out, but someone sent me a Valentine's one year. They said to the Asian Taylor Lautner, and they're like, go team Jacob. And I actually never found out who that who that came from.
That's terrible.
Do you know about
it's somebody
this?
who genuinely hates. No,
did you send this?
No, this is the first time I've heard of it.
Really?
No, it's somebody who genuinely hates you and wanted you to suffer.
This was like 6 or 7 years ago, and I woke up.
It might have been the Antichrist.
It might have been
Obama.
No, yeah, it might have been. This is what our conversation has devolved into. But all of this to say, forget all that crap about your voice matters and how you're here for a reason and how you can breathe things into existence. We really made this episode to tell you that Twilight is the devil. Twilight is the Antichrist, and you should avoid it as such. Okay?
And avoid people who like it, and avoid people who talk about it.
Twitards.
And just...
There's a...
Twitards!
Twitards have a special ring in hell. I'm just kidding. I'm getting too crazy here. But yeah, it's no good, guys. Know what's good for you. Don't expose yourself to things that will corrode your soul.
Truth.
I think we've come here to say what we need to say. Should we wrap it up?
I think so, Daniel.
Okay, why don't I sign us out? For those of you guys who made it to this point, we really, really thank you. You will never get that odd hour back, but we hope that you walk away from it with something that has enriched you, with some wisdom that you didn't have beforehand. But either way, Mike and I appreciate it. Be sure that there will be further episodes, and be sure that we will talk about relevant things next episode. But until then, we really appreciate your viewership, and we will see you next time. So I'm DMAH.
I'm Mike Rao.
And we will see you next time. Signing out. Boom.
All right. Hey, by the way, subscribe, share with your friends.
Oh, yeah.
Do it. Don't be a jerk. If you like what you see, please do it. If you don't like what you see, please be a nice person and do it anyway.
Yes. Out of the goodness of your heart. But thank you guys for joining us. We will see you next time. Later.